Well, he was born in Somerville, Massachusetts. His father was Chakmakjian. He was from Adana and had come in the 1890s. He was a chemistry professor at Tufts University, and he was also a lexicographer. He has a very valuable dictionary from English to Armenian. And I have a copy actually of it. It's a very, very good one. His mother is Scottish. They married here, obviously, and she was an amateur musician, but basically a housewife. The father took care of the family. Alan was the only child, and his name, the birth name, was Alan Hovhaness Chakmakjian. When he was 6 years old, the family moved from Somerville to Watertown. So he was actually raised in Watertown. There's an interesting aspect about his name, Alan Vanes Chakmakjian. The mother really did not care for Chakmakjian, number one, because it was difficult to pronounce, and secondly, it was too ethnic sounding. And she wanted Alan to be raised as an all-American boy. And actually, she changed his name to Alan Scott Vaness. And some of the first publications of Alan's compositions have that name, Alan Scott Vaness. It was very curious. After he grew up, didn't care for the Scott business, and changed the name to Alan Hovhaness. The Vanes became Hovhaness without an H, actually, and eventually, finally, he changed it to what it is today. He was a precocious child, no question about it. He started writing music at the age of 4, and he used a made-up music lines consisting of 11 lines, and wrote music on it. And because there was a family harmonium at home, and asked his mother to play the piece. And of course, the poor lady didn't know what to do with the 11 lines, and she said, "This is not playable," and she threw it in the garbage. And that made a very bad impression on Alan. And he didn't touch music for a while until he was 7 years old, actually. And at that time, he would go to bed, close his eyes, and he would see wiggly signs, actually, in the dark. And he didn't quite know what it was. He knew that this was music, but later he found out that those wiggly lines were very much like the Armenian neumes. So, he has this belief in reincarnation. He thinks that, his cat, Raja, was Alan Hovhaness in another time. He was a strange man.
Let me ask you. When you mentioned Armenian neumes, at what age was he serving in the Armenian church? I understand at one point he was the organist of a church and very close to the Armenian music.
Yes, that started in the early 1940s.
Oh boy!
He was appointed the organist. One day I told him that he was hired as an organist. He got very upset. He said, "I was not hired, I was appointed." There, actually, he met two important. Well, one was a Jewish mystic, Emmerich Hyman, and the other one was a Greek painter, Hermon di Giovanni. And Giovanni introduced him to Armenian mythology, the Greek music, and the Iranian music. I'm talking about Hellenic music. And so his horizon in music became much wider. At that time, also, Alan was introduced or met somebody called Yenov der Hagopian. Yenov der Hagopian was born in Van and knew the Armenian songs of Van very well.
Mm-hmm.
He met him, Alan met Yenov at the church. And Yenov taught Alan Gomidas's music as well as the folk songs of Van. And Alan, with those 3 or 4 people around him, got very interested in his roots. And playing the liturgical music as the Sunday organist at the church, he absorbed and he became very, very. He demonstrated enormous facility in expressing Armenian music the way Gomidas did. I would say that Alan is a true disciple of Gomidas because they both shared the same aesthetic values. Mm-hmm. That is, they rejected, in a way, both, they rejected the Western music, although they used the techniques of Western music, but they stuck to their ethnic origin. Mm-hmm. They held it. I mean, Gomidas, of course, but Alan, more in an international way, was the first composer to write world music because he fused the Western with the Eastern. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So in the 40s, Alan started, there was a committee actually, Dr. Betty Gregory in Boston started this committee, Friends of Alan Hovhaness. And here in New York in the 40s, Maro Jemian, Anahid Jemian, and her husband, George Avakian, helped Alan to become quite active, and they organized concerts in town hall, and they played Alan's music. At one point in the late 40s, George Avakian actually made 8 LP recordings of his own money, with his own money, because George had all kinds of not reactions, but connections with the recording world. Mm-hmm. And that was a very big boost to Alan's career. And he was a little bit, he had his own ways, he had his own mind. He didn't want to have anything to do with universities and teaching and all of that. He wanted to earn his money completely by writing composition, new works and all of that. And the most unique, I would say, work of the 40s is the piano concerto, which Alan wrote for Maro Jemian, and Maro did the premiere in Town Hall. Mm-hmm. That was in 1946, and it's called Lusazak. You see, Alan at that point started learning Armenian and also Armenian letters. So there is the Lusazak, and also the title is written in Armenian characters. Mm-hmm. I have the manuscript, a copy of the manuscript, and it is Lusazak in Armenian characters, coming of the dawn, obviously. In the 50s, in the early 50s, although he kept his interest in Armenian music, he widened his horizon. He had applied several times to get a Guggenheim grant. 5 times he was rejected. Only the 5th time he was given some money. Mm-hmm. And he had the opportunity to go to India and absorb some of the Indian music he was interested in already in the 1930s. So for the first time, the Indian government actually commissioned Alan to write a piece, and we see the Armenian language is an Indo-European language. Mm-hmm. So we are not that far apart as far as the Indian music is concerned or Indian culture is concerned. We have borrowed all kinds of words from Indian. For example, paneer, which means a cheese, is an Indian word. Mm-hmm. There are many, many examples like that. And Alan uh, took advantage of Indian musical scales and Indian rhythmical cycles, and he utilized them in his music. This became very important to him. He traveled to India and started writing lots of orchestral music and all of that. One of the great pieces of that period is The Mysterious Mountain.
Hmm.
Alan had a terrific love for nature.
Hmm.
Mountains were very, very important to
Hmm.
him. There
Hmm.
are many pieces whose title contains the word mountain, like the St. Helens Mountain in the 80s, when St. Helens Mountain erupted. He wrote a symphony based on that.
Hmm.
Um, Later on in the 60s, he even became wider, and outside of India, he started getting interested in Chinese, Korean, Japanese, and also Hawaiian
Hmm.
music. He had a residence in Hawaii for some time. That was a Rockefeller grant, I believe. And he absorbed those cultures and learned a great deal of Japanese music. You know, one of the interesting things was that Alan would go to India and he would learn Indian instruments. You know, he felt that if he could play the instrument, then he could understand the essence of the music much better.
Hmm.
When he was in Japan, he studied with one of the great masters of Japanese music, and he learned Japanese music. And what he learned, he was able to apply authentically. It was not just, oh, well, I know a little bit of Japanese music, I've heard it, I'm going to put it together with Western music, this will be a fusion music. No, he was fully aware of the Japanese music or the Chinese or the Korean or the Indian and Armenian, and he put the whole thing together. It
Sean,
was
Sean, when were you attracted to his music? Why were you attracted? And what influence does Armenia play on his music?
well. I met him for the first time in 1969.
Mm.
That was the centenary of Komitas. And I was the musical director of a recording that the Komitas Centennial Committee put
Mm.
out. And Alan was chosen as the conductor of Komitas's choral music, which we were going to put out, record. And it happened that before I had come to the United States, I had played the organ for the choir that Komitas himself
Hmm.
had founded in 1910. So that choir actually continues. So there was some kind of a tie, and Maro's husband, who was the head of and Ara Avakian, who recently passed away in Fresno, had this committee, and they asked me if I would just see to it that the musical things were according to what Komitas wanted. And it's a milestone recording. And Alan was the conductor. I met Alan at Mauro's house, and we became fast friends. And since Mauro played his pieces a great deal, I got interested in Alan's music and started playing. I played for Alan, and he was very much he was pleased, quite pleased the way I was doing it,
Hmm.
and he encouraged me to learn more and more. And I played his concerti with all kinds of symphonies and orchestras. And I have a recording of Alan's music, and in that particular recording, actually, he plays with me a four-hand piece. He plays the bottom part, and I play the upper part. The Child in the Garden, it's called. And anyway,
What kind of a person was he? Tell us, since you met him, what
oh
kind of a
yeah,
person was he? How can you describe him?
he was aloof. If you didn't know him, he was polite, but he was aloof. He he wouldn't. It was difficult to talk to. He was shy. He was a very shy person from get go. Although he was married 6 times. Once he got to know you, Alan got to know you, then he became very friendly, and he could relax if
Mhm.
he felt that you knew what you were doing and what you were talking. He didn't want to be taken advantage of. That's what his concern was, I think. That was the reason for his aloofness. Um, I liked him. I liked his music because it was a genuine, authentic music. And as I said, it is the continuation of Gomidas's aesthetic principles. Gomidas obviously has influenced everybody, including Khachaturian. I
Mhm.
mean, Khachaturian also uses thematic material from Gomidas's music. So does Alan. But the spirit of the music is more authentic with Hovhaness, as far as the Armenian music is concerned, than Khachaturian's is.
Just as in closing, what can you tell people listening to you? What can they do to get close to this music of Alan Hovhaness?
Well,
Somebody speak about the mysticism of the music and how he hits the point with his music. He's very powerful. What is your recommendation to people who want to get to know him?
Well, you have to understand that, as you said, you use the word, he's a mystic musician. What does that mean? He absolutely rejects the values of the machine age.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
He has nothing to do with the rest of the 20th century composers. If you ask him who his favorite composer is, he says, I don't know. I don't have a favorite composer. So, since he almost dismisses what was going on in the 40s and 50s, he has chosen to delve into the transcendental world.
Hmm.
So that's why I'm saying his music is mystical. It is, I mean, in Beethoven, you know where the beginning and where the ending is of a composition. With Alan, you have no idea. It could begin anywhere, it could end anywhere, and it would not disturb the music. Just imagine a picture, a beautiful painting. With Beethoven, it's like putting a frame around
Hmm.
the. With Alan, there is no frame. It goes on and on and on.